When Hadrian said that tonight was the night, I think we all breathed a sigh of relief. It had been a long week. None of us had left for anything. No call-outs, no chow, no nothing. It had been like that since Charles died, but it got even worse after Marcus was killed. None of us believed that it was Sergeant Thompson, the guy who had been trying to help us, and an air of distrust seemed to hang around everything now. How much did the warden know? What was he planning to do? How much time did we have before he made his move? We had huddled in the dorm and waited to be found out, but it appeared that whatever he had wasn't as targeted as we had thought it was. We had waited and hoarded our food and slept very little in the week up to Halloween, but it appeared that now all of it would come to a head. We would go and summon Jesse, or we would all die in the undertaking. There was no real middle ground to speak of. Officer Clarence has assured us that Sergeant Thomas told him about the plan and how we meant to undertake it. He will remove us when the time is right and take us to the spot that Thompson meant to usher us through. Yeah, about that, Frank put in. How are we going to get over the fence? You said he was taking us to the Bone Way. What is that? Hadrian shook his head. Not over the fence, brother. Under the fence. Under the fence? Frank asked in disbelief. And how would you suggest we do that? We supposed to dig a tunnel in one night? A little faith, brother. We will not be the one digging the tunnel. The tunnel has already been dug. By the warden himself, no less. Then if he dug it, ain't he gonna know that we're in it? Hadrian was getting tired of the questions. Just be ready tonight, and all this will be revealed. After tonight, we will all be free, and we won't have to worry about the warden of Stragview or any of this ever again. You have my word. Frank looked like he wanted to say more, but I put a hand on his shoulder and told him to just trust Hadrian. He hadn't steered us wrong so far, so a little more trust was all we needed. With any luck, by tonight, we would all be free, and this place would be nothing more than a distant memory. B50967 awoke and went into his exercise routine. Today was the day, and he needed to be ready. As he did his push-ups, he thought about how he would have to kill them all tonight. There was no other way, and caught or not, he would have to do it, or he'd be stuck here forever. It had been a week and a half since he had killed Marcus and the sergeant. Since then, the compound had been on high alert. There were patrols on the ground now, dogs in and out throughout the day, and there had been some brief talk about putting men with guns in the warden's tower. The warden had shot this down, saying that he would keep a lookout from his home, but there was still a lot of activity on the yard that would make getting anywhere very difficult. Not to mention, someone had finally realized that all the dead inmates were coming out of E-Dorm, and it had become a big part of the nightly patrols. As he moved on to pull-ups on the side of his rack, he reflected on the last time he had tried to get into E-Dorm. He had made it out of his own dorm easily enough. They weren't watching the high-security dorms as closely as they were the ones with the bunk beds, but he had only made it to J-Dorm before a patrol had nearly caught him. In truth, they would have never seen him, but they would have heard the door when he went in, and he was going to need more time than a few moments to do what needed to be done. Luckily, all the bunks he needed were pretty close together. Unluckily, all the bunks he needed were pretty close together, which would mean that they would hear each other if one of them made too much noise. He had to get them all, too, because if he tried to come back on another night, security would be even tighter. As he did his sit-ups, he cursed the luck that the warden hadn't just given him all the names at once. He could have done 3 or 4 a night and been done with it before the heat came down, but he supposed the warden might have been hoping he would fail. If he failed, then he could just get rid of him, and the people he killed wouldn't be on his head. How many other people were killing for the warden like this? It was hard not to contemplate the death of his new benefactor, but that was a trap too. "No," he whispered as he began squats. "No, I will stay the course. This is my only chance, and I won't ruin it over paranoia." He grabbed his towel, wiping off as he put on a fresh set of blues and moved to the day room. There was a show he wanted to watch. A very important show. He didn't take a seat around the TV, though. Instead, he sat at one of the tables, spreading his cards out to begin a new game of solitaire. He saw the big lug when he walked out of the cell, and placed a 10 on a jack as he side-eyed the festivities. It was well known that holidays were the worst time to be in prison, and Halloween was no exception. Forrester had made it very clear that he wanted to watch a show, The Nightmare Before Christmas, that was coming on around noon. Apparently, he watched it every year with his girl when he was on the outside, and he was going to watch it, no matter what. Forrester also happened to be 400 pounds of muscle for the Aryan Brotherhood, and the collection of men around the TV were decidedly darker than his brothers. They were watching football, because inmates were always looking for some reason to gamble, and Forrester grimaced as he strode towards the collective around the TV, his advance already marked. B50967 picked up his cards and proceeded to his cell. He stood in the doorway, preparing to run it shut before the OC went flying. "Hey," Forrester said, following it up with one of those words B50967's father had been so fond of when he was a kid. "Give me that damn remote." "What did you say to me?" said the fellow with the remote. "You heard me, boy. Give me that remote before I break your face for it." Some of the other Peckerwoods were beginning to hear the call to adventure, and B50967 got ready to secure his door. "Make me, you piece of..." But Forrester made good on his threat, and then the fight was on. By the end, 8 of the 12 combatants went to confinement, and 4 of the others went to the infirmary. The fellow who had been holding the remote actually went to the hospital before it was all wrapped up with a skull fracture, and B50967 watched it all from the little window in his cell. The response was swift, the force brutal, and there were 12 freshly empty beds that night when the lights went out. Good, B50967 thought as he lay on his bunk waiting for the count to end. Less people to see me when the time comes. "Okay, it's time." I shuddered awake as Hadrian whispered in my ear, "How the hell had I fallen asleep?" Frank was already crouched beside him, and I could tell it was late. The clock on the wall said 5 after 11, so count was likely still going on. That would take the extras off the yard, so now would be the greatest time to move if we didn't want to be caught. Pretty smart, I thought, as I got ready. Hadrian had a homemade shoulder bag with him, and he looked as lucid as I had seen him since the heist. It was like someone had splashed cold water on him, and he was ready to get business done now. That was good, because we had business to do. We all went to the door, not bothering to crouch since the guard was gone, and when Officer Clarence came to open the door on the side of the dorm, he looked pretty scared. Why shouldn't he be? I thought. He was getting ready to walk the razor's edge right along with the rest of us. "Okay, come on. We have to make this quick." We followed him to the rec yard, and as he popped the lock, he was already ushering us through as he snapped it back in place. "Okay," he said, leading us to one of the sheds. "This is the way, but I need you boys to do something for me. As I open it, I need you to make it look like I was coerced. I need you to hit me across the jaw, and when they find me, I'll be passed out, and I can say I was unconscious. All right?" "Hit a guard and get my freedom?" Frank joked. "This night just keeps getting better." Clarence slid the key into the spot in the wall, and as he turned it, the bricks gave way, and we could see there was a staircase rolling down into the ground. "You go to the end of that hall and open the door. Don't stop to talk to anybody, and don't try the keys on any of the doors. And don't linger. The quicker you get this over with, the better. Good luck." We thanked him, and then Frank spun and put him out with a right cross that snapped his head to the side. "Well, at least he won't have to pretend now," Frank said, growling as he took the keys and descended into the darkness. The Bone Way, as Hadrian had called it, turned out to be a prison beneath the prison. There was a low row of cells, each with a little window and a number, and as we went through them, we heard people begin to call out. Some of their voices were low and raspy, others were gurgly and not at all human, and a few spoke languages we didn't know. We didn't linger, but I couldn't help but glance around. There were people down here, people who looked normal enough, but there were others who were deformed or downright alien. We passed a guy with worms coming out of him, a guy with ice for skin, a guy who yelled about rats, and an old guy I thought might be asleep in the middle of his cell. We passed them all, stopping for none of them, and when we got to the door at the far end, Hadrian opened it to find a stairway leading up to a hatch. The hatch opened up by a maintenance shed outside the fence, and we felt the air of the free world for the first time in a long time. "Come on, no time for dawdling," Hadrian said. We snuck around the perimeter, dodging the headlights of the chase vehicles as they drove around the prison. It wasn't hard, we really just had to wait until they went to the other side of their route, and soon we were standing beside the little fence that made up the graveyard. There were no inmates in the cemetery. Inmates were buried elsewhere. This graveyard was for the honored dead, staff who died honorably in the line of duty, if their families permitted, were laid to rest here, and since Jessie hadn't been claimed by her family, she had been put here when she died. Hadrian had told us this 100 times, but it was a little different to see it with the light of the Halloween moon overhead. Her grave wasn't hard to find. It was large, ornamental, and stood out in a little field of small headstones. The legend read, "Jessica Ridley Sampson, beloved nurse of Stragview." She had died in October of 1975, on Halloween, as it happened. Suddenly, it all made sense. The timing was purposeful. We were going to bring her back on the anniversary of her death. "You boys get the items set up. I'll mark out what needs doing," Hadrian said. And so, we set to work. It hadn't been easy to sneak onto the rec yard this time. B50967 had been waiting for them as they came out, but he knew he would need to take them without killing the guard. The warden likely wouldn't care, but B50967 was also very curious to know what they were up to. He'd been tracking them for a month now, finding out a little here and a little there. He knew they were up to something, and he wanted to know what. He found the gate locked, but not locked well. B50967 had managed to slip through the small opening, and he was glad that he had stayed in shape. Had he put on the weight that most of them do when they come here, he would not have been able to slip in, and as he came through with a jingle of chains, he looked back at the captain's office, expecting someone to challenge him. No one did, and he moved on, unremarked upon. B50967 went into the room, the same one where he had killed the sergeant and Marcus, and found another officer laying on the ground. He bent down to check the man, thinking he might be dead, but he was only unconscious. He thought about killing him for a moment, but decided against it. There was nothing to gain from it, and the warden hadn't greenlit it. He proceeded down into the shadowy opening, something that interested him more than the unconscious body, and found the answer to another Stragview secret. B50967 had found the under-prison, the one people whispered about, and no one quite believed existed. He passed the rows and rows of cells, stopping at one as he heard the scritch-scratch of something being carved into the wall. Looking at it, he could see a young man, now bent and in need of a haircut, as he carved things into the wall of his cell with a piece of stone. The handwriting, at least what B50967 could see, was small and cramped, and he could have likely gone right on carving it for the foreseeable future. There was a little break in some of them, and he thought those might be the end of one thing and the start of another. If the man was aware of him, he never said. He just kept scraping away at his work, never tiring, never slowing. Someone cleared their throat behind him, and B50967 turned to see an old man, though this one had likely been old when he got here. Leave him to his work. The boy has a fretful nature about him. I sense that you have work of your own to go about. I suggest you do, before you are discovered here. B50967 was suddenly assailed by an overwhelming urge to sit down and take it easy for a while. Was it coming off this man? He didn't know, but he knew he didn't have time to sit here and chinwag. He moved on, finding the hatch still open, and making his way out and into the wide world again. Like them, he felt he could have just escaped and moved on, but he knew they would find him. Worse still, he didn't think that he could make it through the woods. He had heard things about those woods, both when he was a CO and when he was an inmate, and the rumors were dark indeed. No one came back from the woods, except that one lucky bastard who sat eternally in confinement. B50967 had no desire to test his mettle out there, and so he turned towards the graveyard and proceeded. He dodged vehicles out on post and made his way towards a lone candle burning in the graveyard. He could hear the chanting before he truly came into the boneyard, and it sounded as if they were getting to whatever they were doing. They were speaking in a strange language, voices raised and moon high, and as B50967 approached, he saw all three of his targets. They had been kind enough to gather for him, easily putting themselves under his knife, and he meant to repay their kindness with a quick death. He slipped up behind the one closest to him, the one with his back to the entrance, and when he slipped the knife into his neck, he gurgled and bled all over the place. The big one, Frank Weiss, E2, 18 low, salt and pepper hair, 6'2", snarled and lunged at him, but the other one didn't even stop. Frank buried him under his bulk as B50967 tossed the other one, Gabriel Smith, aside, and he was raining blows down on him before he was ready. B50967 was no slouch, though. He pulled his arms up the way they had showed him when he was a new officer, and let the lug smash against him for a few moments until he was a little less sure of it. The chanting went on. B50967 could hear it, and as Frank Weiss's blows fell a little less solidly, B50967 struck. He put a knife in his gut, then he took it out and put it in his chest. He missed the heart by inches, but kept stabbing as the big man tried to hit him. When he pushed him off, Frank Weiss was shaking and coughing, but Hadrian Cavill never noticed. He had the rock in his hand, holding it high as it glowed, and as B50967 stalked in, the man went right on babbling. He kept on too as B50967 stabbed him again and again, but as he fell, Hadrian Cavill said something loud and with a note of finality to it, a tone of completion, and when the ground before the grave burst open, B50967 fell back onto his latest kill and panted like a dog. What the hell was this? Was Hadrian some sort of wizard? No, otherwise he would have stopped him. When something began pulling itself out of the grave, B50967 scuttled back like a kid with an open closet door. The hand that came out of the grave had a set of well-manicured red fingernails as it came over the lip. B50967 could see soft hands that had been unmarked by time. The hands were shaking, unsure of what was going on, and when the face of a woman emerged, he saw that she was young and beautiful. She was in her mid-20s, her face mostly untouched by strife, and she looked confused about what she was doing here. She just climbed out of what was presumably her own grave, making B50967 think she might have every right to be confused. "What's going on?" she asked, and when she saw the men that were dead around her, she started to shake and look at him like he might be dangerous. "Please," she begged, I've only just come back. I don't want to die again, at least not tonight." He thought about killing her, the same way he had thought about killing the guard at the entrance to the tunnel. In the end, though, he just took the totem from Hadrian Cavill and went back the way he had come. The warden hadn't told him to kill her, and with one left to go, B50967 wasn't feeling like doing any freebies tonight. He left her in the graveyard, making his way back to the dorm as carefully as he could. He closed the door to the underjail. He took the keys from the guard that was still unconscious, and he was back in his room before anyone was the wiser. He'd been gone less than an hour, and as he fell asleep, he wondered how long it would take for the alarms to sound again. Jessie wandered into the Stragview woods after she pulled herself away from the graveyard. Her revival hadn't gone as planned. She seemed to be human again, but the process was supposed to leave her with her spiritual abilities, and she seemed to have nothing but the clothes on her back and a deep sense of dread. When the beasties began to circle her, Jessie felt that her life might be at an end much too soon. When they hit a ring of spectral essence, a small circle of ghostly forms, Jessie thought she might not be as weak as she thought she was. Boys, manners. We have a lady present." The things that had charged her, these shiny black horrors that sprang from the forest, parted as a man in a ratty hoodie and jeans came from their midst. They showed him deference, a level of respect that was rare from these creatures, and as he offered her a hand, she stood up and found him to be normal enough. "It seems that you may be more than you appear to be. My name is Reese, Marcus Reese, and I've been waiting for someone like you for a while now. How would you like to help me burn that hateful prison to the ground and see that pompous warden sent back to hell where he belongs?" "Oh my," Jessie said, his words hitting her like an unexpected pleasure. "You know just what a lady wants to hear." "You're still here. Thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague here. Always a pleasure to see all my new and old viewers coming by for another one of my spooky tales. If you'd like to support the show, you can always take part in one of our channel offers through Fume or Aura, or you can just click on another video when they come up. I'd really appreciate it. For our newer viewers, we also have lots of playlists and other things if you'd like to get caught up. I know some of my series have been going on for quite a while. If you'd like to get my latest book, there's a link down below that'll take you to my Amazon page. Towesey Homestead just came out, so if that's something you'd like to get your hands on, go ahead and have a look down there. If you'd like a signed copy, you can go ahead and email me from my email address on the site, and I'll get with you about shipping information and ship you a signed copy. If you'd like to support the channel in a more monetary fashion, we also have membership through YouTube, and we've got a Patreon that you can get the information for in the description. We have lots of tiers and everything to suit your needs. Patrons that support on the $10 tier, that's our Ghostly Reader tier, get a book anytime I write one, signed and on their doorstep. As you may have noticed, there's a list of patrons and members on the screen, and I'd like to personally thank every one of them for taking a hand in the future of this channel. Well, that's enough for tonight. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.